Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Urban Entrepreneur Show. Now, today, we're diving deep into the world of intrapreneurship. That's a concept that is reshaping how business innovates and grows. And our guest today is Scott Benham. He is a leading authority on this topic as the co-founder of Intrapreneur Academy. Now, in this episode, which is titled Unveiling the Power of Intrapreneurship, Turbocharge Your Business Growth, Scott will share some invaluable insights on how to foster the entrepreneurial spirit that can help to remarkably increase your success within organizations, perhaps even yours, urban entrepreneur. So get ready to uncover some strategies and principles that can revolutionize your approach and your business growth. So welcome to the Urban Entrepreneur Show, Scott.
Thank you for having me, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am just so excited about this, as you can possibly see. And I'm all teeth and all smiles. I am just excited about this because when we first talked, this subject really piqued my interest because I have a great VA that is really much more than a VA.
Yeah.
And what you have described as an entrepreneur probably is more appropriate to the title that she has within our organization. But before we get into the questions that I have for you, I want to tell our listeners a little bit more about who Scott Benham is. So, Scott, as I said a little earlier, is the co-founder of Intrapreneur Academy, where he channels his passion for cultivating innovation within organizations. Now, with over 2 decades of experience in entrepreneurship and business development, Scott's expertise lies in empowering individuals and teams to think creatively. Now, I have to tell you, I came across Scott and his beautiful wife as part of the John Maxwell team, and he was doing some fantastic work there. So you really want to pay attention to what this young man has to say. Don't let his youthful appearance fool you. He's full of wisdom and special tactics that will help your business to grow. So he is a sought-after speaker and consultant, and Scott has guided numerous, and I underscore numerous, companies in implementing intrapreneurial activities and initiatives, which has resulted in, how should I say this, tangible growth and a competitive advantage. So, Scott, tell us, what is an intrapreneur?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Anna, for the awesome introduction. An intrapreneur is an entrepreneur's secret weapon, in short, right? Because an intrapreneur is everything that an entrepreneur needs to do but can't do in order to grow their business. So the simplest way to really put it is, imagine every entrepreneur, in your audience. Imagine them growing their business and getting to that next level, but realizing that they have to let go of good to get to great. And their greatness is always going to be to build the brand, to build the vision, to build the vision, or to build the dream, to galvanize the organization, no matter how big or small. Like, with vision, people will perish, right? Or without vision, people will perish. So the entrepreneur actually is very similarly aligned and kind of wired like an entrepreneur, because they're seeing that vision and they recognize, you know what, it's mine to build. Like, I become the surrogate owner of this vision, And I'm going to build what's necessary to get to where we're going inside the organization. And in my experience, entrepreneurs, that responsibility is a weight, it's an anvil around their shoulders. And it's like they're trying to tread water. And it sucks the energy out of them, like to deal with the day-to-day and not actually work on the business, but work inside of it. So the entrepreneur is this like secret weapon because they're not really interested in being the front man or the front woman or in the limelight whatsoever. Their joy comes from actually building and innovating and implementing within the organization.
Oh, I love that. And you've more than adequately described the entrepreneur. Oh, the operations piece. Oh my God. It is daunting for many of us. And so I thank you for really explaining intrapreneur, because as I've always understood it, it was usually a person that was inside of a large corporation, not necessarily an entrepreneurial venture. And entrepreneurial ventures, they run the gamut on size, but still in all, the entrepreneur is still very close to the fire. And as you said, this is their baby, and they've been given the opportunity and the charge to birth it. But oh my goodness, all of the pieces that go along with it, it's much too much.
Well, and I don't want to ostracize the folks who do feel that entrepreneurial drive in large organizations. Innovation matters in large organizations.
Yes.
But I think where I thrive and where the history of my career has been so fruitful is that I like to work with entrepreneurs under that like 500 million, ideally under 100 million, right? So 3 to 100 million-ish really creates this like necessity to execute, a speed that creates that the collaboration matters. When the red tape gets to be a little bit too red or a little bit too thick, it can really like hamper that innovation. So like I like we always say go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
Yes.
Entrepreneurs are really celebrated in that like small to medium-sized business. Now, that's not to say that like places like Amazon and Google don't have entrepreneurs, because I think you'd be pretty surprised to hear how many side project entrepreneurial ventures got created out of those large organizations. But what I think is important to note is it's the creativity that sets it apart from what other people might think. Oh, so you mean you're just a integrator or just a COO or just a director of operations? And those roles are fantastic, but they're rarely creative. They're rarely like if you were the one charging your now realized intrapreneur, you realize like there might be significant gaps in the map that you've provided for her. You said, hey, start in Seattle and make your way to Tennessee in the next couple of weeks, right? You didn't tell her how to get there, but she might choose the scenic route, the most efficient, right, most effective route, whatever, right? Entrepreneurs operate without a map. And that's really important because if we're being real, most of that early stage growth is trial and error. Yes. And the frustration can really bubble up for entrepreneurs if they don't have somebody to share that with.
Well, like I said, that is truly true for me. And I am not at that level of business yet, but even at my level and levels of below 3 million, that is still very real. That is a real deal. Okay. So, can you just elaborate on the concept of what you call commissioning, and how does that accelerate success and growth in partnerships between intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs?
Man, I think this is the secret sauce. And honestly, the commissioning has everything to do with what we're going after, where we're going. Okay. And it really, and this might be, this might be a side topic, but it's equally as important. It really navigates the relationship between the entrepreneur and the intrapreneur in a very unique way. So co-missioning in and of itself is, I believe that if you're going to want to make an impact, if you're going to want to really like do something that drives you, you should do something that you care about. Like, so I only want to work with people that are trying to accomplish something that I care about. Now, that doesn't mean that I won't go into certain industries, because sometimes the vision of the business owner, of the entrepreneur, is so vivid, right? And they can see the good in the mess of whatever industry they're in. I can get on board with those sorts of things, right? But it's the old adage, like, I'm just not doing, I'm not making money for money's sake. I want to make an impact. And then, the money will come with it, right? So that vision matters. Where they're going matters. And the difference between a regular old employee, which we need employees, there's nothing wrong with employees, and an intrapreneur is the intrapreneur actually connects with the vision of where they're going, and they build from there, right? And there's this really interesting dynamic that we start to unpack inside the Intrapreneur Academy and for our apprentices that we train up. And it's this difference between co-missioning and codependency. Right? Because, well, the entrepreneur is the boss, the business owner is the boss. So I'll just do what the boss says. Only if it aligns with the vision where we're going. Because what you don't want as the entrepreneur, even though it might feel good, you don't want to just order your people around at your every whim, right? You want them to hold the vision. You want them to build the infrastructure, the systems, the operations towards what you said you were going. It's your job as the CEO. It's your job to make sure that you're always keeping the vision in the forefront, right? So if I'm executing just based off of the things that you want versus the things that we need, that's when we get into codependency, which is pretty unhealthy, right? It's pretty unhealthy in any organization. So the co-missioning is it's a deeper seated passion to go after that thing, right? But it's also this reality that as an intrapreneur, I care almost as much about where we're going than you do as the business owner. And that's probably the best testimonial I have personally ever received. I had a guy who I was helping, for a number of years, and he said to me, I've never had somebody who cares as much or more about my business as I do. I didn't even think these sorts of people exist. And that is the difference between an employee and an intrapreneur, because an employee wants to focus on their function, and they want to focus on the things that they're responsible for in their lane. That's fantastic. Our entire, economy probably runs on 80% or more of employees.
Yes.
Every organization needs that internal innovator that's going to kind of push things a little bit more forward. And in fact, kind of pave the way or be a pioneer internally to get everybody around this vision and kind of multiply the acceleration around it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that because, again, as you explained, in our earlier conversation about what the intrapreneur was, I could see so many of those elements in the person that's been supporting me for the past 5 years. I will say X and she will say, oh, okay. And then she'll come up with a way to get to X that I hadn't even thought of.
Yeah.
I had no clue.
Isn't that great that two halves, and I'm not saying it's a 50-50 role, right? Because as a business owner, you carry a lot of risk, right? And I think that's where a lot of people draw that entrepreneurial line, and it's a fair line to draw. An entrepreneur's risk is the innovation that they take within the organization.
Yes.
So yes, they absolutely have less skin in the game, but we all know the skin in the game for the entrepreneur is the thing that they want because the upside is that much greater, right? Absolutely. So I'm not saying the pie is 50-50, but in and of itself, we're very complementarian to the entrepreneur. So we're strong where they're either not weak or don't have enough time to do it, because the time is always going to get smaller for an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. So, what strategies or methods do you recommend for entrepreneurs to identify their ideal entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a super good question. Number one, you have to be aware that the way that you're currently doing it might not be the best way. And here's how most entrepreneurs that I work with do it, right? They get started and they're doing everything themselves, and then they hire a VA, or they outsource some work on Upwork or Fiverr, and then they hire another VA. And now sooner or later, they have this really interesting like amalgamation of people. And maybe somebody's a little bit more full-time and maybe somebody's a little bit more part-time. But what actually happens is it's like, imagine like that fireman's kind of like net when someone has to jump out of a city building, right? It's like, if everyone's not pulling equally as tight on that net, that person hits the ground every single time. And the degree of difficulty of having all of those disparate people pulling equally is very high, because the person holding it all together is the person who has the least amount of time and whose energy needs to be at the highest in order to grow the thing. So in a way, they build out a necessity, but then it dissipates because either in frustration, or sometimes they just stop doing the business because it's so frustrating and so overwhelming. I've had entrepreneurs say, you know what, I just want to fire my whole team and start over new, right? That's the level of, in some cases, despair that people come across. And our whole perspective is like, I believe good people create good outcomes, right? I want to work with good people. I want to work with awesome projects. And if that's the case, I don't want those projects to fall by the wayside. Like, I don't want, their dreams to fall dead on the battlefield of entrepreneurship. If they just had somebody who knew how to step in and navigate that, right? So I would start to think differently first about, what do you really need? Now, Anna, your example of finding your entrepreneur as a VA is a fantastic one, but I think if for every one of those, there's 90 others where it didn't work out, or you literally have to teach the person so much and spend so much time that it becomes not a good return on your investment.
Yeah, so, I just call it a time suck.
Yeah, there we go. Right. I was trying to be respectful on the show.
Oh, yes. And look, I've kissed a few frogs. Trust me. This young lady really was a godsend. Really, she was just a godsend. And that's all that I can accredit it to, because I just cast the net and she jumped in. And I had no idea, except for what was on her resume and things like that. But it's like, God, you answered a prayer that I didn't even know I needed an answer for, because I could not have foreseen. And I think that's what you're saying. Entrepreneurs, they have a big vision on what it is, what the end result is, but they don't necessarily know all of the components that are needed in order to make that vision a reality.
100%.
And yes,
like 100,000%. So the strategies, that would be one of the strategies, is just know what you know what you don't know, right? Identify what that looks like. Now, naturally, the risk of hiring somebody, because an entrepreneur is going to cost more than a VA. They're going to cost more than an EA, than an OBM or DOO. Like, it's going to be a bigger expense. But the mind shift is recognize that you're getting somebody with 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 skill sets. Now, are they a 10 out of 10 in every single one? No, but at this stage of their business, you don't need a 10 out of 10, right? What you need is you need more time, more execution, more implementation, and more results. Because if we have a result, we can improve a result.
Absolutely.
Right? So as a result, you want to make sure that you're hiring, number one, people with what I like to say, at least a level 2 or level 3 level of expertise. Okay, level 1 basic expertise is you can follow a process. And I would say 95% of virtual assistants fall in this category. And that's fine. That's great, because if you have well-defined processes, You can give them a documented process and they could follow it.
Yes.
That's wonderful. But the problem with that is when you're just starting off, not many people are swimming in SOPs. Like, it's just not happening, like,
No.
so you're like, you know what I really need? Like, it's funny if we like reverse engineer it. I really need somebody who can follow a process that I can pay inexpensively and that it can just run, right? But then you're like, well, I don't have processes, right? So you're saying I need somebody. Actually, the reality of my business is I don't have a map. I need somebody who can navigate without a map, but I'm going to hire somebody who needs a map. It doesn't make sense.
No,
right?
It doesn't. But we ask for it all the time.
All the time, because it's like that old adage, like if you want to start exercising, right? Like, start really small. Do 1 push-up a day instead of 100, because your mind gets tricked in the idea like, oh, I can easily do 1, right? I could easily hire somebody at that level rather than at this level. It's a harder thing to figure out. So strategy number 1 would be that, like, basic level of expertise is I can follow a process. Advanced level of expertise, level 2, is I can create processes. And then global is I understand the inputs and the outputs of processes to create systems. And if that language at all is confusing, let me just give you a really quick example, right? Let's imagine this podcast, right? So Anna, this podcast, this is time that you've invested. This is an hour that you've invested, right? Now, this hour that you've invested could be a podcast, but it also could be probably 10 or more Instagram Reels and maybe some TikToks as well. And you know what? Why not a YouTube short? And oh, by the way, somebody who took notes on this podcast is going to identify the golden nuggets to make some quotes for social media. And then this might have been so good. It might have been such an empty piece in your overall value ladder that it gets to become a part of a course. Now, that 1 hour is now no longer an hour. It's 5, 6, 7, 10 hours.
That's right.
So an intrapreneur, that's how somebody thinks about how do we invest once and multiply to many, right? And that's a powerful thing, because for you invested an hour, and then throughout the week, you're seeing all these amazing posts go out and this amazing content go out. And maybe the transcription has something to do with on your website. And it's a wonderful multiplication thing. But somebody who follows a process can't do that. It's just not in their nature yet, right? They can learn it, but they that's not in their nature. But somebody who creates processes and understands the inputs and the outputs, it's like second nature to them. They say, well, your time is important. If I can get more of Anna's time on the business rather than in the business, how do we get her to invest 4 hours a week on content, and we can multiply that out to 40 hours over the month? That's a powerful concept.
Well, that's just it. That's one of the things that I always look to, and sometimes get frustrated with, not with just my business, but with those that I interview on the show. It's like you don't realize that 1 hour of content can be multiplied many, many, many times over. And, but that doesn't always happen. They just look at it as a one-time deal, and that's the end of that. And they just go on to the next one-time deal.
Well, and now, so when you encapsulate that, now we're thinking, okay, I see now, like, so now all of a sudden the entrepreneur starts to see the value of a higher level skill set. Absolutely. Because now it's not just, oh, I've done this, I've done that. It's understanding inputs and the outputs of a process to create systems requires a diverse skill set. You have to have a little bit of project management, right? You've got to be pretty organized. Chances are you're going to be creative. Maybe there's some graphics or something that you have there. Now, I'm not suggesting that an intrapreneur is going to be better than a graphic designer, right? But done is better than perfect, especially when you're just starting out.
All day long.
So this is why some entrepreneurs might want to consider what an intrapreneur looks like. And then the really big one, because we're getting out of the day-to-day for the entrepreneur, business owners are just highly paid employees until they're actually not required to work inside the business.
You hit the nail on the head.
That's hard to hear. I know it's hard to hear the first time I heard it. I was like, but I filed an LLC, you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't matter. You're just an employee until you don't actually have to be involved in that day to day. So in a cool way, you've got somebody who cares as much about you and much about your vision, right? They are kind of a gatekeeper of the vision. They're the leader. They become, if they're not already, the leader of the team, right? And then you come in to do your genius, your vision, your execution, your marketing campaigns, your strategic partnerships, all those things. And all the while, that entrepreneur is making sure all the team is going toward that place and elevating the skill sets of the organization. And there's one more little piece that I think is important. I don't know that it's a secret or like a step in hiring an entrepreneur, but it is important that, like, as your audience considers, how do I add to my team? Think about thin slices. Okay. We build with thin slices all the time, right? So let's imagine you want to build a course. Okay. Well, a course can be very involved. I've built lots and lots of courses in my career. It can be very, very involved. But you know what? Like, it's better for you to understand if people actually want the course first before you actually go and build it, right? So just like this, somebody, if they were entrepreneuring for you, might go through your last 20 podcasts and find the little pieces, right? Find the 5-minute clips that create a through line of content that could be a minimum viable course, a thin slice of a course. Now, is it going to be super produced and wonderfully graphics and all these things? Well, no, not really. But what you would do is you would have something to sell. You might say, hey, I've been thinking about doing this course. So I did a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of a course. I'm giving it away for the first 100 people for free if you could give me some feedback on the course. The course is a Google Drive folder with 20 videos, 3 minutes to 5 minutes each, right? An investment of an hour of time or what have you, 2 hours of time. Get feedback, then you build the thing that you want. So these thin slices actually are like breadcrumbs to get you to the bigger thing. Where a lot of entrepreneurs, where they get stuck, is they have this big vision and they try to build it, but they're building it on a very, very unstable foundation. And you got to build in small slices so that you're not investing tons of money on the front end without any result, which can be super frustrating.
You are so spot on. And I really hope that, those who are listening to this recording, as well as that are listening to this recording today, or those who are, listen to it anytime in the future, that they will really listen and take action on this, because this is the way right now for us to be able to scale our business, especially in this world of technology and AI and all of this other stuff. But if we don't have the people that have the thought processes that can carry these things forward for us and for themselves, then we're going to always be behind the 8 ball. Just ground feeding.
You are so spot on. So here's a good example, right? Like there's a saying that we have inside the Intrapreneur Academy, and it's become a little bit of like a rallying cry. And it goes like this: do and be, not just oversee. Okay. Now, because I know we come from the kind of the same Maxwellian sort of culture, I'm going to go out on a limb I assume that you want to add value to people. Right?
Absolutely.
Now, the challenge sometimes with that mindset is, if overextended, you give too many things away for free, right? I'm going to add value. And then you hide under the, I'm not going to charge, right? And there's a problem there. And when you start to recognize the value that an entrepreneur can have, you have to recognize the value that you carry, right? So in so doing is like, imagine for a second, like all these other competitive or comparable sort of roles. Well, I believe in EOS integrators, and I believe in online business managers, and I believe in virtual assistants, and I believe in executive assistants, and I believe in COOs, right? If you really look at what they're doing, right, everybody's trying to elevate themselves over and above the doing. Just sit with that for just a second. I mean, VAs and EAs, not so much. But in a way, if you've ever been in a team-based environment, everybody kind of clamors for the entrepreneur, the business owner, the leader's approval, attention, favor, value, right? With the invent and the advent of AI, if you've been overseeing for 2 years or more, how do you know how to use artificial intelligence to drive meaningful outcomes to your entrepreneur's business? How do you know how to drive efficiency where efficiency could happen like this just because you've implemented something simple?
Yes.
And the answer is you wouldn't. So like entrepreneurs are executors. We're finishers. We're doers, right? Now we're not doers for long. Meaning like if when we talked before, I kind of gave the metaphor of the forest, right? We're pioneering through the forest and we're cutting down trees and cutting down vines and all the things. It takes a skill set, takes a certain amount of strength to do that. Now the people behind you and the people behind them have an easier and easier time doing it, right?
Absolutely.
So your audience wants somebody at a higher skill set to pioneer through the muck and the mire, that's the unseen things, because you don't have a map, to create the map, to then give the map back to others. So doing matters. Now, as you do, now you understand and you can become the thing that everybody needs, and then you hand off that responsibility in a stewardship way. That's the commissioning kind of part of it coming full circle. Because if I was your entrepreneur and I'm doing something that's way beneath my skill set for long periods of time, I'm not stewarding that very well at all. Because all of a sudden, if I can hand that off to somebody who is a virtual assistant, who's good at level one, executing, following the process, then I have the ability to up-level myself and work on more complex, pioneering, sort of innovative sort of problems. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I just love this conversation. I really do. So could you just share a quick success story or a case study where you've partnered, or I should say where the partnership between an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur led to significant business growth or transformation?
Yeah.
So that's the first one. And then I have a follow-up for that.
All right. So I'll make it quick. So 2020, the world shuts down, and I feel like I was a part of a community that I didn't really feel like I wanted to be a part of anymore. I was feeling a little bit selfish, and I'm a person of faith. And God said, I want you, the reason that you want to quit is because you're showing up to receive rather than give. Now, mind you, in this particular community, I paid like $5,000 to be a part of it. So I kind of showed up to receive, right? So I said, well, how am I supposed to give to this? Like I'm a nobody in here. And God said, I want you to take notes. So fast forward, like I took notes. He told me to illustrate these notes in an infographic. I posted the notes in the group, went to sleep. The next day, it kind of went viral. It led to a really unique opportunity for me to create a course for the leader of this community. And I knew his vision just by being a student of his, just by humbling myself and taking notes, being willing to understand the details of what he was going after. And in that detailed sort of moment of taking notes, and in that moment lasted, 2 months of taking notes for each training and things along those lines, for free, by the way. He said, hey, I want you to build me a course. We ended up building that course and then 2 more after it. And from May 25th of 2020 until July 5th of 2020, those courses resulted in $8 million of sales.
Wow.
And a business was born, right? Like you can't just make $8 million and be like, see you later, I'm going on vacation, right? Now there was members and people who wanted to be coached, right? And I tell that story because a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, we want to show up like exalted, but it's when we show up humble that we actually get to be exalted. And people would be like, how did you get this opportunity? And I was like, well, I showed up to give instead of receive. And that was a game changer for me. So that was probably, one of the fastest growth periods that I've seen with that sort of thing. Now, it was a 3-year relationship that ended fantastically, just as fun as it started. And, over 3 years, we did, I don't know, just south of $40 million in courses, masterminds, workshops, the whole thing off of one core bit of content that we just kept rinsing, repeating, and improving over time. And that was, one of the folks who said, I've never had somebody who gives me as much time leverage as you do in any of my businesses. This is the best investment I've ever made.
Wow, that is so great. And so my last quick question is, so in your experience, what are some, taking everything into consideration that we've talked about, what are some of the challenges faced by entrepreneurs when transitioning? And transitioning, I would say, from a solo operation to building a team. And what nuggets can you give them so that they can start the process today?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Anna. Number one is start fast, start earlier than you think. It feels so counterintuitive, but start giving responsibility away quicker than you could possibly imagine that you should. It's going to be messy, but it's going to be worth it. That's number one. Number two is make sure that you have somebody who's keeping you in the loop, right? So them keeping you in the loop just means we work with what we call the Intrapreneur framework. So it says problem, priority, procedure, process, product, partnership. So problems are easy to find, right? But the priority of those problems, right? The priority of those problems really on those early stages are dictated by the entrepreneur. And it's a tripwire for them typically because they're concerned, I'm going to hire somebody and now I'm no longer involved in what they're going to be working on. No. In fact, it's the opposite. It's you're ordering their steps, they're executing the steps. It's like the most amazing way to be complementary to each other and not have so there's going to be coaching involved, of course, right? But hire your first person fast and always keep a rhythm of problem priority, right? So that you're always establishing priority until they think like you, until they operate like you, and not like a robot, but they're keeping your brand, your mission top of mind. That's how you know you have a co-missioner.
Mm-hmm. That is so good. Wow, Scott, this has been just one of the best hours that I've spent. Because the great thing about interviewing, entrepreneurs and other business leaders is that I get to learn, even from them. You know what I'm saying? I'm asking questions, but some of those questions are, kind of personal because I want to learn it myself.
Yep.
And that's one of the great things about, having, the Urban Entrepreneur Show and getting to interview, to talk with, to chat with people like you. And I am just forever grateful and, for the opportunity myself, it's not just a one-way street. Just let me say that.
Thank you.
So, Scott, could you just tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we run a free group called the Intrapreneur Academy, where once a week we train on intrapreneurship. We've got frameworks. It's a free Facebook group. There's nothing to buy, nothing to sell. Our goal is to just really elevate intrapreneurs and help them understand and see a little bit differently, right? So you can join us there, and we'd be happy to have you. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to just chat, talk shop with you. It's been a wonderful hour on this end as well.
Oh, well, look, we'll have to have you back again, at another time. Yeah. Because like I said, I'm glad that this is being recorded because I'm going to go back and take my own notes, but, I'm one of those people that, sometimes I can't chew gum and talk at the same time. So I like to make sure that I also have access, to the recordings, because some of the stuff are real mic drops. Yeah. And you had several of them on our show tonight. And so I just appreciate, you're taking the time. Please give my best to your beautiful bride, Caitlin. I tell her that I still adore her.
I definitely will. She'd be very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Yes. And so, my friends, as we wrap up another exciting episode of the Urban Entrepreneur Show, I just want to again extend my heartfelt thanks to Scott Benham of the Intrapreneur Academy, and to you, our listening and viewing audience, because our passion for urban entrepreneurship in particular, but entrepreneurship in general, is really the thing that drives us. And we're so thrilled to have each of you on listening to our show week after week.